Hey guys and girls, Board now back with you for another brand new television review. On this video I will be talking about the first episode of the new Netflix series Ratched, and it is simply called Pilot. So this went up today, the first season, I think it's 8 episodes in the first season. And this is one of the big releases of let's say early autumn, I guess. From Ryan Murphy, who has like a multi TV deal with Netflix, big name producer, writer, and in case you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, it is kind of the origin stories, if you like, of Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So it's kind of like a spin-off and a backstory for her. She's played by Sarah Paulson in this new drama, who's worked with Murphy at least once on American Horror Story, maybe more than once, but certainly on there, and there's quite a few familiar faces who have worked with Murphy before. It's a big name cast. There's all sorts of faces that pop up. Vincent D'Onofrio's in here. You've got Cynthia Nixon of Sex and the City fame. So a lot of familiar faces pop up over the course of this first episode. And it's set in 1947. So just to give you the setup for the first episode, because a lot happens in the first episode. They really motor through the plot to kind of set things up. But we open with this crazed guy, this crazed young man, knocking on the door of this religious sort of home or institute, this house being run by the clergy, and we can tell very early on that he's up to sinister things. He basically goes on a violent killing spree, and he's there to target the head clergy, the guy running the house, and he's got a beef with him because he says he turned his mother into basically a prostitute, into a life of being a junkie to prostitution, and that led to her being taken away from him as a young boy. So he basically holds the father responsible, and I mean, not for nothing, regardless of the fact that he's obviously kidnapped and this father, and then he's killing people. The way this whole thing is framed is that it's quite a sleazy sort of feel to this house. So I think the drama is purposely highlighting that, hey, these are kind of sleazy characters running this place, regardless of whether you obviously agree with his actions or not. That is worth sort of highlighting. So he becomes known as the clergy killer. This is set in California, and then at the same time the title character, Nurse Ratched, is traveling to California. No coincidence, of course. And she is hell-bent on getting a job at this local, mental institute, basically. And she claims that she has an interview with the head of the institute, Dr. Hanover, which is basically a lie, but it's her way of kind of scheming into getting an interview. And then we see her manipulate things from there to get her not only a job at the place, but also to start working her way up, which she just starts doing very quickly. But she takes advantage of everything. She's very cold and calculating, which is kind of consistent with the nurse Ratched you would have seen in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And she sets up in town. She sort of starts staying in this home. We see the housekeeper, which is quite a character in itself. And there's this whole political backdrop going on with the governor, which is Vincent D'Onofrio's character. D'Onofrio, I have to say, I love him as an actor, but he is gloriously sleazy in this. You really... if it wasn't so entertaining, it would be very uncomfortable to watch. But he's really hamming it up big time. But we see like him talking to Hanover, who's desperately trying to get funding for the institute, and D'Onofrio quickly takes a liking to Ratched when he sees her and sees what she's up to. And because of her actions, it like leads to D'Onofrio's like governor almost giving his backing to the institute and using it as well as a way to make him look good for the forthcoming election. We see him exploit this at every turn, getting like pictures and stuff. And, well, I mean, that's basically the episode in a few beats, really. It kind of ends with Ratched. I mean, I can go through the beats, but basically she sets up, because when she's waiting for the doctor to arrive home, because she insists, hey, you said he might be back this afternoon, so by your own logic, which is a great line, it says, by your own logic, it could be sooner, basically. Like, she uses that against, like, Nurse Bucket, who I think is another character from the film. I'm pretty sure I've heard of Nurse Bucket before, and they have quite a rivalry in this episode. But yeah, when she's waiting for the interview, or waiting for the doctor to get back, she's like looking around the institute, sort of creeping around, and she catches like one of like the younger nurses having an affair with one of the doctors, and she immediately uses that to her advantage, because she threatens to expose the affair if the young nurse doesn't help her get in. And you know, she says basically, give me your job, otherwise I'll expose it, basically. And she's doing various things to get in close with this one particular inmate who's like causing all sorts of problems. And I think the whole gist of the character is that, certainly in this drama, that she is very direct, she's very sort of firm, and she's got like this sort of almost this willpower, this like massive personality that takes over. And it's kind of, I mean, from the beginning you can see she's very sort of icy and manipulative, but at the same time she has, I guess, just enough of a charm about her to seduce people. And I think because she is so direct, it's a way to get them on board. So yeah, I mean that's basically the beats of the episode. It like ends with her finally meeting up with the guy from the beginning at like he's been moved to an institute, to another location, and it looks possible that it could be her son or something like that. But I really enjoyed this. This is like just really highly stylized, pulpy, sort of soapy, high class cheese fest, basically. I mean, it sort of ticks all the boxes. I think if you like things like Bates Motel, for example, and how that takes kind of this sort of kind of weighty, stylized sort of thriller, and just does like an entertaining, fast-moving backstory with it, which is kind of character-driven and full of kind of hammy dialogue and just very sort of like pretty to look at, then I think you're going to enjoy this. I think this will tick all the boxes. I know people have very mixed feelings on Ryan Murphy. He seems to be very up and down. Like, I think the guy has his niche, and I think this genre is his niche probably. I don't think he's that brilliant as a director or writer, but I think if he can get the right sort of characters and the right casting in place, and because the guy he has a certain style about him, so if the rest can fall into place, then I think you're maybe onto a winner. Another thing I'll say is that I I mean there's certain trepidation about this just because of how well loved One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is, not just the novel, but obviously the film with Jack Nicholson. But what I would say about this is then you can treat Ratched, I think, as a completely separate like entity almost. It does feel like this kind of alternative look at, well, it is like a spin-off involving a different character. A bit like Bates Motel was from Psycho, I guess, because I think it would be different if they went with, like, say, the Jack Nicholson character. I think if they chose him for this project and they did some kind of backstory with him, then I think that would be more distracting just because obviously he was the lead in the original film. But by doing this way, it does feel like it's separate enough from the original story, and I think it's just makes it a lot more fun, really, going with Ratched and her backstory. And they couldn't have cast it any better with Sarah Paulson. I think she's absolutely tailor made for the part. She like dominates the screen. She just has this brilliant sort of icy stare, and she just controls every scene she's in. She's like really sort of icy. I think she just has a presence, but she's also very kind of laid back and cool. I think she's pretty much nailed the character as you used to know her. But I think the difference between her and the Ratched we got in the film is that I think this Ratched does have a bit more sex appeal. I think you can see that this is like the younger version of the character, but she does have a lot of the tricks also that we associate with Ratched, and that sort of that controlling, that icy cold sort of stare, and the way she manipulated things. But Paulson absolutely nails this role. I think obviously it's a great supporting cast. I'm not quite sure who plays the housekeeper, but she's like an eccentric character in herself. And I think the way it just plays into like their stares and their reaction, and Ratched just looking around this mental institute, just like gazing around, looking into. It's almost like weaseling her way into this world. Just she's got this laser sharp sort of focus, which is just this keen sort of eye. But just certain visual gags, like like when she's introduced and being shown around, like the house she's going to be staying in by the housekeeper. The housekeeper says, it's not much to look at, but there is a working phone, and that can then you kind of cut to this fellow resident, this good-looking guy who's another actor I've seen in plenty of stuff, but there's immediately this stare between them, which is just worked so brilliant with the line because it was about her saying, "Hey, it's not much to look at," and immediately she's eyeing up this guy, and it's almost like she's in control just from that stare across. And then the next line is something like about how I will not allow, kind of like romances or something like that, she says. So it sort of leads on from there. And she has some great lines, the housekeeper, because at one point, because the story's going around town about the clergy kill. So at one point, when Ratched comes in, the housekeeper is like, the killer gives me chills, and I'm not talking the Bela Lugosi type kind. And it's just this hammy, really funny delivery where it's almost like she's enraptured. It's like she's somewhere between being like thrilled by the thought of this dangerous guy doing this killing, but she's sort of repulsed. But yeah, there just seems to be this excitement as well. And the way she laughs, like sort of cackles evilly when Ratched then leaves, because they have quite a heated exchange, is just so brilliant. If you enjoy hammy stylized stuff, this really ticks the boxes. There's some brilliantly funny, sharp dialogue. There's a line early on where Ratched first comes into town, and she's almost undressing like the gas attendant with her eyes. But this whole episode is about her being in control, her willpower over people. As I said, that strength of personality. But there's a great line at the gas station where she has literally this young guy under her gaze, and they're talking about the local rumours and stuff. And he asks a question. I can't actually remember what his line is, but Ratched says something like, "You should date more often. Your fingernails are dirty," which is brilliant. But yeah, I think this will appeal if you like stuff like Bates Motel. Also, it has this Hitchcockian type feel. It's set in the 40s, but it has this kind of 1960s, very like blunt sort of colour like schemes. One shot I really liked was when she's like walking through the institute, and I can't remember I think it's after she's like caught the nurse having it away basically with the doctor, and it's just this striking shot of her walking down the hall, and it like freeze frames it, flames. What am I saying? Frames it, freeze frames. Hard to say, folks. Hard to say, and it just has this really dominant like color scheme of red, like just straight down the shot. Yeah, and it sort of has this Hitchcockian type soundtrack. And all this stuff has been done before, and this isn't really breaking any new ground, but it's just so much fun the way they rattle through the stuff, the way she's so good, she's so commanding. It's like she's a super bitch the way she manipulates everything, but Paulson just makes her that little bit more endearing and funny. As I said, there's great casting around her. Cynthia Nixon is on top form. Now, what they do after this will be interesting, because they've rattled through, as I said, a lot of stuff to set this up. And it's whether they can carry the character forward in that, but there's certainly a lot of fun watching things spiral out of control and watching her working her sort of magic. And it's kind of going to be interesting to see where we go from here, what they do with the character. But I know this won't be for everyone, but there is a soft spot I have for this sort of like television, this where it's got a certain style, a certain prestige, but it's also very silly and quirky and just very tongue in cheek. But it definitely had me really engrossed. I think the first episode flew by for me. Sorry, I can't say words tonight. And it's nearly an hour, and I think it went in really quick. So great stuff. I enjoyed this a lot, and I think because the casting is so good, because they seem to have the ideal Nurse Ratched, I think that's what gives me confidence moving forward. Certainly for this season. I mean, it might be a one-off thing anyway. I don't know if they would do any more after this season, but I think certainly for this season, I'm really into this character and I'm really intrigued now to follow her. So yeah, I'm going to keep this up certainly for another couple of episodes, unless there's suddenly a dip in the quality. But this was an absolute blast. I love Sarah Paulson, and this is a great part for her. So I'm not quite sure what pace I'll be doing it then, mate. Hopefully I'll be back in a couple of days, maybe 2 or 3 with the next episode. As I said, I think there's 8 in total, but a really good start. So let me know what you think of the new Ratched series in the comments below, or certainly this episode in particular, if you have seen any further, because I'm sure some of you will be binging this and you may already have finished. If you have seen further, then please don't give away any spoilers in the comments. I mean, if you want to comment generally on how you felt about it, then that's fine, but in general, don't really talk much past this episode is what I'm saying. But let me know your thoughts on the first episode, and I'll be back in a couple of days, I think, hopefully with the next review of episode 2. But I'll see you guys again soon. Goodbye.